Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
Chapter 1. Her Mother's Words. The smell of medicine was strong in a small room of the hospital. It was night outside, and it was quite dark inside the room. Maria Rodriguez sat beside her mother's bed. She had been sleeping like that for the last 23 hours. Even though the doctors told Maria that her mother was going to get better, and even though she was only 12 years old, she knew it wasn't true. Anyone could tell, looking at her mother, that there wasn't much time left. As she took her mother's hand, the memories of how it all started came to Maria's head. Maria had been born in a small village in Mexico, a place of poverty but also of love. Her father worked in the fields when there was work to be found, while her mother made and sold bread and cleaned houses to help make some money to survive. Of course, life was very difficult. Their home was a single room with an old wooden floor and no running water. But there was the one most important thing that they all had: each other. But everything changed the day her mother fell ill. At first, it was just a simple infection, and it wasn't something that the doctors couldn't treat. However, day by day, her condition worsened until finally, she had to be taken to the clinic. Now Maria was sitting beside her in this cold hospital room, heartbroken and very lost. Then her mother woke up. Her face was very pale, and her breathing was very weak. Maria felt afraid and called for the doctors. Her mother shook slightly, her eyes trying to open. For a moment, Maria saw a weak smile, but one full of love. But the smile was quickly gone from her face when she tried to open her mouth. Maria held her mother's hand tighter, trying to be brave. "Mama, the doctors are coming. Just hold on." Her mother's look softened. "My sweet girl," she whispered, "look at you. You are so strong. You have always been strong. Stronger than you know." She paused, her breathing slow and weak. Then a small smile touched her mother's lips. She took a shaky breath. "My daughter, please look after your father. You only have each other." "But we have you," said Maria weakly. Her mother's eyes fixed on her daughter, and she said, "Do you remember the stories I used to tell you? About the birds that fly far away to find a better life?" Maria nodded quickly, with tears in her eyes. "Yes, Mama. You said they always find their way." "Yes," replied her mother. "Well, now it's time for you to find your way. You must promise me to study very hard. Education is the only way to a better life for people of our village." Maria nodded, trying to stop the tears in her eyes. "Yes, Mama, I promise." The doctor came into the room. He looked tired. His face was kind, but Maria could see worry in his eyes. "We are doing our best," he said softly, "but we do not have the right medicine." Maria wanted to scream. How could this happen? Her mother's illness was not rare. It was something doctors could fix. But here, in their small village in Mexico, there were not enough doctors or medicine. That night, Maria's mother took her last breath. Maria sat outside the clinic looking at the stars. She felt empty. She couldn't believe that her mother was gone. Her father stood beside her. His eyes, as well as Maria's, were red from crying and sleepless nights. He put a hand on her shoulder. "We must be strong," he said. "Your mother believed in you." Maria looked at her father, and then back at the sky, and clenched her fists. Now, she had a new dream. She would become a doctor. She would help families like hers. No one should lose their mother because of bad health care. She looked up at her father. "I will become a doctor, Papa. I will help people like Mama." Her father nodded. "I believe in you, my daughter." Maria had no idea at all how she would do it. She was just a girl from a small village. She had no money, but she had a promise to her mother to keep, and she would do whatever it took to make it come true. Chapter 2. The Wall of Words. Maria knew that becoming a doctor was a very big dream. In Mexico, even to study medicine, you needed to know English. Many important medical books and papers were written in English. But if she wanted to go to the United States, where the medical schools were better and there were more resources, English was even more important. The idea of helping her community, and maybe even coming back to her village to make the clinic better, made her think about the U.S. Her school in the village taught some English, but it was very basic. They learned simple words and sentences, but they didn't learn how to really speak. Maria felt lost and worried. How could she learn enough English to become a doctor? She tried to study on her own. She found some old English books, but they were difficult to understand. She had no one to practice with. When she tried to say English words, she felt shy and silly. She worried that she would never learn. One day, she was reading an old medical textbook she had found. It was full of English words she didn't know. She felt like crying. She closed the book and put her head in her hands. "This is impossible," she thought. "I will never be able to do this." She remembered her mother's words. Education is the only way out. But how could she get an education if she couldn't even understand the language? She thought about her mother's death. The doctor in the clinic had tried his best, but he didn't have the right tools or medicine. Maria knew that if she could become a doctor, she could change that. She could bring better health care to her village. That thought gave her new strength. She would not give up. She would find a way to learn English even if it was the hardest thing she had ever done. She started by listening to English songs on an old radio. She tried to copy the words, even if she didn't understand them. She watched American movies with Spanish subtitles, trying to match the English words with the Spanish translation. It was slow and difficult. She made many mistakes. Sometimes she felt like giving up, but she kept going. She remembered her promise to her mother. She remembered the look on the doctor's face when he couldn't save her. Slowly, very slowly, she started to understand a little more. She could pick out a few words here and there. She could understand simple sentences. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for Maria, that was enough. She knew she had a long way to go, but she was finally moving forward. The wall of language was still there, but she was starting to climb it, one word at a time. She would not let anything stop her from achieving her dream. Chapter 3. A Big Jump. Maria's father saw how hard she was trying. He saw her studying late into the night, listening to English songs and practicing her pronunciation. He knew how much her dream meant to her. One evening, he sat down beside her. "Maria," he said, "your mother would be so proud of you. She always wanted you to have a better life." Maria looked at him, her eyes filled with sadness. "But Papa, it's so hard. I don't know if I can do it." He put his arm around her. "Your mother believed in you, and I believe in you too, even if it means you have to go far away." Maria was surprised. "Far away? What do you mean?" Her father took a deep breath. "I've been thinking. Maybe the best way for you to become a doctor is to go to the United States. The schools are better there. You will have more opportunities." The idea seemed impossible. The United States was so far away. It was a different world. Maria had never even left her village, but she knew her father was right. To really achieve her goal, to become the kind of doctor she wanted to be, she needed to go. They talked about it for many nights. They chose the USA for several reasons. First, the medical schools were some of the best in the world. Second, there were more resources and technology. Third, Maria could earn more money and send some back home to help her father. And finally, she could return to Mexico one day with the skills and knowledge to really help her community. The decision was difficult. It meant leaving everything behind. It meant a huge financial sacrifice. They sold almost everything they owned, even the small piece of land where they grew food. They borrowed money from family members. It was barely enough for a one-way plane ticket to Los Angeles, a few weeks of rent, and some food. Los Angeles was chosen because it had a large Mexican population, which might help Maria feel less alone. On the day Maria was leaving, her father hugged her tightly. "Make us proud, my daughter," he said. Tears streamed down Maria's face. "I will, Papa. For Mama and for all of us," she replied. She walked towards the plane with one small suitcase. Inside were a few clothes, her English books, and a picture of her mother. Her heart was heavy with sadness, but also filled with determination. She was scared, but she knew she had to be brave. She was carrying the hopes and dreams of her family and the memory of her mother with her. She was taking a big jump, a leap of faith, towards a future she could only imagine. Chapter 4. Lost in a New World. Los Angeles was nothing like Maria's village. Everything was huge and overwhelming. The tall buildings, the busy streets, the constant noise, it was all so different. And the English, it was everywhere, fast and confusing. Maria felt like she had landed on another planet. The airport was the first challenge. Maria struggled to understand the announcements. The signs were in English, and she felt completely lost. She had practiced some basic phrases, but the words seemed to fly past her too quickly. She felt a wave of panic. She was alone, in a strange country, and she couldn't even understand what people were saying. She finally found her way to a bus that would take her to the neighborhood where she had rented a room. It was a small shared room in a boarding house, in a part of the city with many other people from Mexico. That first night, Maria cried herself to sleep. The room was small and unfamiliar. She missed her father, her village, and the familiar sounds of home. Doubt filled her mind. "Have I made a terrible mistake?" she wondered. "Can I really do this?" The next few days were a blur. Maria tried to find places that helped people learn English, but it was difficult. There were forms to fill out, lines to wait in, and always the language barrier. She felt the sting of being different. Sometimes people were impatient with her slow English. She felt ashamed and discouraged. She tried to find a job, but it was hard without good English skills. She walked for hours, looking at signs in shop windows, trying to understand what they said. She felt invisible, lost in a sea of people who all seemed to know what they were doing. The cultural differences were also confusing. The way people dressed, the food they ate, the way they interacted, everything was new and strange. Maria felt like an outsider, looking in on a world she didn't understand. She spent her evenings studying her English books, trying to make sense of the words and phrases. She listened to the radio, trying to catch the rhythm of the language. But it was exhausting, and sometimes she felt like giving up. The dream of becoming a doctor seemed so far away, so impossible. She was lost in translation, struggling to find her way in this new and overwhelming world. Chapter 5. The Coffee Shop Surprise. After a long and tiring day, Maria felt hungry and exhausted. She had been walking around, trying to find resources and information, with little success. She decided to stop at a small coffee shop near her boarding house. Inside, the smell of coffee was comforting, but Maria felt nervous. She looked at the menu board, trying to understand the different options. It was all in English, and she struggled to read the words. She stepped up to the counter, her heart beating fast. Coffee, please," she said, her voice shaking. She tried to point at a pastry, but she couldn't remember the English word. The person behind the counter looked at her, and Maria felt her face turn red. She knew her English was bad, and she felt embarrassed. She wanted to just go away. Suddenly, a young man behind her in line spoke. Un café con leche. Pan dulce, he said, trying to speak Spanish. It wasn't perfect Spanish, but Maria understood. She looked at him, surprised. He was an American, with kind eyes and a friendly smile. He was clearly trying to help her. Yes, Maria said, surprised. Coffee with milk and sweetbread, said the guy to the person behind the counter. The young man smiled. I'm learning Spanish, he explained, but I'm not very good. Maria smiled back. I'm learning English, she said, and I'm not very good either. They both smiled, a little awkwardly. It was a small moment, but it felt significant. Maria was grateful for his kindness. He had made her feel a little less alone. He ordered his own coffee, and then they both waited for their drinks. They talked a little, using a mix of broken English and Spanish. They got their coffee and pastries, and then the guy smiled at her again. Good luck with your English, he said. Good luck with your Spanish, Maria replied. They went their separate ways, but the encounter left Maria feeling different. It was a small spark of hope. She realized that not everyone was impatient or unkind. She realized that learning a language was a challenge for others too. It was a two-way street. That night, Maria thought about that guy and his kind smile. She felt a little less lost, a little less alone. Chapter 6. Coffee Girl. Maria decided to enroll in English classes at a local community college. She had found a flyer about ESL, English as a Second Language classes, and it seemed like the best option. She was determined to improve her English, no matter how difficult it was. On the first day of class, Maria felt nervous. She walked into the classroom and looked around. There were students from many different countries, all with the same goal, to learn English. Suddenly, she saw a familiar face. It was the young man from the coffee shop. He saw her too, and his face lit up with a big grin. Hey, coffee girl, he said, walking towards her. Maria felt her cheeks turn pink, but she smiled. Hello, she replied, feeling both embarrassed and happy. I'm David, he said, extending his hand. Maria, she replied, shaking his hand. They sat down together, and David explained that he was taking Spanish classes at the same college. I saw you struggling at the coffee shop, he said, and I wanted to help. I know how hard it is to learn a new language. Maria nodded. It's very difficult, she admitted. I feel so lost sometimes. Me too, David said. My Spanish is terrible. Then Maria had an idea. Maybe we can help each other, she suggested. You can practice your Spanish with me, and I can practice my English with you. David's eyes lit up. That's a great idea, he said. A language exchange. And so their language pact began. After class, they met at the coffee shop or in the library. They talked in English and Spanish, correcting each other's mistakes and laughing at their mispronunciations. Maria found that David was patient and encouraging. He never made her feel bad about her mistakes. He celebrated her progress, no matter how small. David, in turn, found Maria to be a dedicated and enthusiastic learner. He admired her determination and her positive attitude. As they practiced their language skills, they also learned about each other. They discovered they had some things in common. They both loved old movies, for example. They found that they really liked each other. A friendship was blooming, and maybe something more. Chapter 7. Learning and Loving. Making a Life in the USA. Maria threw herself into learning English. She used several strategies. First, she tried immersion. She surrounded herself with English as much as possible. She listened to English music, watched English television shows, and even listened to English radio. Second, she focused on practice. She forced herself to speak English, even when she made mistakes. She talked to people in shops, at the bus stop, and anywhere she could. It was scary at first, but she got braver each time. Third, she was persistent. She studied diligently. She attended all her ESL classes, did her homework, and used online resources to learn more. She never gave up, even when it was difficult. Of course, David's help was very important. Their language exchange sessions became a regular part of her week. They met several times a week to practice, and it made a big difference. Slowly, Maria's fear began to disappear, and her confidence grew. As their language skills improved, their friendship deepened. Maria and David started spending more time together. They studied together in the library, explored different parts of Los Angeles, and shared their dreams and fears. They started going to the cinema to watch their favorite old movies. They were falling in love. But it wasn't always easy. There were cultural differences to navigate, and sometimes their own insecurities got in the way. They had moments of hesitation. Maria also faced other challenges. She had to work long hours at a low-paying job to pay for her rent and food. She worked as a cleaner in an office building, and it was tiring work. She missed her family terribly. She worried about her father, who was alone in Mexico. She sent him money whenever she could, but it was never enough. David provided emotional support. He listened to her worries, encouraged her to keep going, and helped her with her studies. He became her rock, her best friend, and someone she could rely on. Academically, Maria was doing very well. She excelled in her ESL classes, and soon she was ready to move on to more advanced courses. She even started taking some pre-med classes, the first step towards her dream of becoming a doctor. Chapter 8: Reaching the Dream. A Doctor's Path Begins. Before Maria could apply to medical school, she needed to pass a difficult English test called the IELTS. This exam tested her reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills. It was a major hurdle, but Maria was determined to overcome it. She studied harder than ever before. She spent hours practicing each part of the exam. She used practice tests, online resources, and her textbooks. David helped her, especially with the speaking section. They practiced conversations, and he gave her feedback on her pronunciation and grammar. The IELTS exam was stressful, but Maria felt prepared. She had worked incredibly hard, and she knew she had improved her English significantly. She took the exam, and a few weeks later, she received her results. She had passed. Her score was high enough to apply to universities. The next step was applying to medical school. This was another hard process. There were many forms to fill out, essays to write, and interviews to prepare for. Maria felt overwhelmed at times, but she persevered. She wrote a powerful personal essay about her mother's death and her desire to help underserved communities. She explained how her mother's lack of access to proper health care had inspired her to become a doctor. David helped her proofread and edit her essay, making sure it was clear and compelling. After months of waiting, Maria received an email. She held her breath as she opened it. It was an acceptance letter from a Harvard University medical school in the United States. She had been accepted. Maria screamed with joy. She couldn't believe it. Her dream was finally coming true. She called David immediately, and he was just as excited as she was. They celebrated together, their relationship stronger than ever. They had supported each other through so much, and now they were ready for this new chapter. They decided to move in together, to share an apartment near the medical school. Maria's story is a story of resilience, hard work, and the importance of human connection. She showed that the American dream is possible, but it requires sacrifice and a willingness to face challenges. She encourages others to follow their dreams, no matter where they come from. The world needs more healers, more dreamers, more people willing to fight for a better future, she says. And it all starts with taking that first step, even when you're scared, even when you feel lost. Believe in yourself, find your close person, and never stop learning. Maria plans to return to Mexico after finishing her medical residency. She wants to build a clinic in her village, the same village where her mother died. She wants to provide quality health care to the people there, fulfilling her promise to her mother and her community. She wants everyone to have access to the medical care they deserve. Her final call to action: find your passion, embrace the challenge, and never underestimate how much good one person can do.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.